Hello everyone, my name is Rajni Jha. Welcome to PIB Weekly Analysis at Drishti IAS. In today's session, we are going to discuss some of the most important pieces of news from PIB from 3rd of August to 9th of August. Let's get started. The first piece of news that we have is from Polity and Governance. It says Prime Minister Narendra Modi marked 7 years since the abrogation of Articles 370 and 35A on 5th August 2019. What does it mean? In simple terms, this news is all about 7th anniversary of the constitutional changes made in Jammu Kashmir after ending Article 370 and 35A, after removing Article 370 and 35A on the 5th August 2019. So, what were these articles about? Article 370 gave special constitutional status to the state of Jammu and Kashmir. Usually, all the provisions of Indian constitution and the laws of parliament automatically applied to the entire of India except Jammu and Kashmir before removing Article 370. But once Article 370 was removed, now it was applied to Jammu and Kashmir as well in its entirety. Similarly, when we talk about Article 35A, Article 35A allowed Jammu and Kashmir legislature to decide who was the permanent resident of Jammu and Kashmir. And the permanent resident of Jammu and Kashmir would get some special privileges like property ownership, government jobs, scholarship, and other government benefits. Now, this was also removed. Both of these were removed, and the state of Jammu and Kashmir was reorganized into two union territories, Jammu and Kashmir and Ladakh. Jammu and Kashmir was the union territory with a legislature and Ladakh without a legislature. Now, this marks the 7th anniversary of this on 5th August 2019. This marks the 7th anniversary of removing Articles 370 and 35A and thereby removing the special privileges, the special status, constitutional status that Jammu and Kashmir had. Why is it given in PIB? Because they're calling it a milestone for Jammu and Kashmir and Ladakh, as now because of the removal of these two and because of including or inclusion of Jammu and Kashmir in India in its entirety in the constitutional terms also, this highlights progress in infrastructure development, in infrastructure, education, healthcare, entrepreneurship, and sports. They are also saying that it also means constitutional integration. What does that mean? Now there is greater uniformity in application of constitutional rights and laws, because now all those rights and laws will also be applicable to Jammu and Kashmir. At the same time, because those rights and laws are applicable to Jammu and Kashmir as well, this gives constitutional rights to women and marginalized communities. So this also ensures social justice. Government highlights that this expanded rights and benefits for women and marginalized communities, so it ensures social justice as well. But there's one more part given here. It is linked to the anniversary, 125th birth anniversary of Dr. Shyama Prasad Mukherjee. Why is this important? Because historically, he opposed the special constitutional arrangement of Jammu and Kashmir, and he anyway advocated for its complete integration with India. Now, because it was done on this date, so it is also linked to the anniversary of Dr. Shyama Prasad Mukherjee. Next is India's caregiving ecosystem. Niti Aayog has launched the report Reimagining Care Strategies for Empowering Caregivers in Viksit Bharat at the rate 2047. That is Viksit Bharat by 2047. Now, what does it mean? See, India has large amount of care work. Now, that care work can be formal and informal. And most of the care work is informal. Most of the care work is unpaid. So, care work, India has large amount of care work. Mostly it is unpaid, unpaid in the form of when family members are taken care of, especially by women. That is unpaid caregiving. And then there is paid caregiving by nurses or other professionals, right? So there is paid or professional care which is given by trained caregivers, nurses, attendants, and other care workers. And most of this care work is informal. Most of this care work is informal and fragmented in India. This is why Niti Aayog has launched a report, Reimagining Care. That means we have to reimagine this care work. We have to formalize this care work. We have to legalize this care work. And we have to include from informal, we have to include this in the formal setup. So, reimagining care strategies for empowering caregivers. How these caregivers can be empowered. Why is there a need for empowering caregivers? Because India is, if you really think about it, there is aging population. We have aging population, and it is not just family, private family responsibility. It can be a part of economic and social infrastructure. If you look at India, we have there are children, there are elderly persons, there are persons with disabilities, and we have aging population, and all those people need caregiving. So we have to formalize this caregiving. We have to give training to the caregivers also. So this talks about caregiving or caregiver ecosystem. This specially talks about caregiving ecosystem. Now, what is it propose? It proposes building a professional, organized, and accessible caregiving system in India, as I told you. And how will they ensure it? By improving caregiver training, recognition, social security, and welfare. Why is it important? Because right now we have aging population, rising aging population, and the family dynamics is changing because both men and women are working, both the husband and wife are working. Who will take care of the children? Who will take care of the elderly people? So because the family dynamics is also changing, and there is growing demand for caregivers, so there is a gap here, there is a space here for making this care work a formal sector, making this care work a formal responsibility and economic and social infrastructure, not just private family responsibility. Similarly, this report also highlights the growing domestic and global demand for trained caregivers. It's not just in India, it is global demand, presenting an opportunity for India, space for India to create jobs and become a global hub for caregiving services, because nobody is right now, largely nobody is thinking about it, right? The key recommendations of this also includes national policy on caregiving and national caregiver council. What is that? National policy on caregiving. It this gives a recommendation that government would create clear national framework for caregiving. For example, what kind of training should be provided to them? What kind of social services, social security, standard, working conditions, wages should be provided for them? So there has to be a proper framework for it. And second, this council, National Caregiver Council, this council is a national body that would coordinate and oversee caregiving sector and help implement the policies that are suggested by this national policy on caregiving, right? Okay. So, as I told you, caregiving and care should not be seen only as a private sphere. It should not be restricted to private sphere. It should become a social and economic infrastructure, because there is a global demand also. It's not just a demand in India, there is a global demand for caregiving as well. Next, Panchayat Advancement Index. The Ministry of Panchayati Raj has introduced the Panchayat Advancement Index to assess Gram Panchayats on progress towards localizing sustainable development goals. What does it mean? This simply measures how well the Gram Panchayats are progressing towards localizing or towards achieving SDG on local level. So this basically talks about, this index talks about how well the Gram Panchayats are able to uh, accept, are able to localize sustainable development goals, are able to here localize sustainable development goals. Next, under PAI 2.0, 2.59 lakh panchayat across 33 states and UTs were assessed for financial year 2023 and 24. So there were around 2.59 lakh panchayats were assessed to see whether they were able to achieve the sustainable development goals on a local level, because we are talking about Gram Panchayat. And what are the key points here? First, the 36.82 lakh elected representatives and stakeholders trained on SDG themes, because if you want to achieve SDG, you need the trained stakeholders, you need trained officials who can achieve SDGs, who can achieve these goals at local level, right? Do we really need all these numbers? Not necessarily. You just need to understand what this index is all about, and maybe a few examples of it, right? So for example, you can remember maybe this data or this data, that should be sufficient. You don't need all the data from this. So 1.56 lakh panchayats adopted development priorities from financial year 2026-27. Mainly this talks about, what does it talk about? It talks about the fact that 1.56 lakh panchayats have chosen what would be their development priorities. For example, it would be water sufficiency, right? 31,000 have chosen water sufficiency, 32,000 have chosen clean and green panchayats. So these many 1.56 lakh panchayats have already chosen what would be their focus on, what kind of developmental priorities they'll be focusing on. Then This PAI assesses panchayats, this index assesses panchayats on 9 SDG themes to identify their strengths and gaps. And also, these Gram Panchayat development plans are being aligned with these themes to strengthen ground level, grassroots level governance and sustainable rural development. And there is one more thing, there is no special fund that is given to top performing panchayats. That is something you should remember, right? So panchayats are preparing developmental plans. This means the panchayats are preparing developmental plans so that they can be aligned with these SDG goals for better grassroots governance and sustainable development on Gram Panchayat level. Next we have from environment. First is Gobardhan scheme. Now see, we can remember it from the name itself. Gobar is dung, cow dung, it could be cow dung, right? Dhan is wealth. So we are trying to convert dung to wealth, right? So maybe we are trying to convert waste material into wealth, and for current times, the contemporary times, the wealth is clean fuel, right? For us, the wealth is clean fuel. So that's how you will remember. Gobardhan scheme talks about the conversion of, let's say, cattle dung, right? It could be cattle dung or waste products, crop waste, organic municipal waste into biogas or compressed biogas, and then from this we will create clean fuel or clean fuel and useful fertilizers. So that's what this is all about. Union Cabinet approved Gobardhan National Circular Bioenergy Scheme with an outlay of 23,731 crore for 2026-27. You don't need to remember this. You need to remember this to expand India's compressed biogas sector. And how would they do it? By converting cattle dung or organic municipal waste or crop waste into biogas or compressed biogas or organic manure, and from there you will get clean fuel, right? Okay, so there is one more thing here, that is circular economy. What is circular economy? It says circular bioenergy scheme. There is circular economy. Circular economy is when you keep using and reusing something. That is circular economy. We'll see about this in I think in future slides as well. Okay, so what are the key points here? First is to increase tenfold or 10x in CBG production. CBG is compressed biogas, as I told you. So once we have more of compressed biogas production, our dependence on fossil fuel will decrease. So our dependence on imports of these fossil fuels will also decrease. Similarly, what does it do? It converts agricultural waste, cattle dung and organic waste into clean fuel and organic manure, as I told you here. Then it assures stable pricing, capital support, pipeline connectivity, credit guarantee. See, the point is, if we are producing a fuel, a clean fuel in our own country, it will reduce our dependence on the imports. It will create a stable source of fuel, so it will also create stable pricing, right? Similarly, this also focuses on helping farmers, MSMEs, cooperatives and rural entrepreneurs to set up their own CBG, that is compressed biogas development, their CBG products and CBG projects. Next, it also aims at boosting rural employment, waste management, emission reduction, and energy security. I've just told you all of this. The moment we start creating a new sector, this automatically would create employment, right? It will also ensure waste management. How? Because we have seen here, we are converting waste into biogas and that into clean fuel. So it will also reduce our emission. Why? Because the fuel that is created from this is clean fuel. So it will also reduce our emissions of carbon dioxide. And at the same time, this will also ensure energy security because we are producing it. So we are not dependent on somebody else to give us fuel. Next is Maha Water Mission. The Maha Water program launched on 1st June 2026 by ANRF and the Ministry of Jal Shakti aims to fund mission-oriented research, innovative solutions to India's major water challenge. How would you remember it? See, Maha is major, right? Something big. So Maha Water program is a government initiative that funds researches and new technologies to solve India's major water problem. Maha is major, water is water problem. So Maha Water Mission is trying to solve India's major water problem How will it solve it? By, this is a government initiative that will fund research and new technology so that major water problem can be solved. And what are its key points? First, it ensures sustainable water resource management, drinking water and water quality. Because we are trying to solve water problems, these are the water problems we face, and these can be solved by the researchers, right? Next, human ecological health, water use efficiency, and circular economy. Now you see there is circular economy. What is circular economy? Circular economy means using resources again and again instead of just using them once and throwing it away. So if we want to increase efficiency, we should be able to use and reuse the resources, right? So this focuses on that as well. So water, we have major water problems. If we can use and reuse water, then that will also solve the major water problem, right? Climate resilience and adaptation. This program mainly focuses on collaboration between universities. Why? Because it has to focus on research. Research is usually done in universities, research institutions, startups, MSMEs, and industries, and with at least one industry and startup or MSME, which is micro, small, medium enterprise, right? It also includes initiatives such as Bharat Wind Portal and Jal Shakti Hackathon. So such initiatives are also included in this so that we can solve our water issues by funding, by including funds in the research and new technologies to solve problems related to water. Next is International Clouded Leopard Day. What is that? India has launched Clouded Leopard Conservation Action Plan for the protection of this clouded leopard. This is clouded leopard. So India has launched this to protect them, and this is especially found in Northeast India. Right? This is especially found in Northeast India. Now, what are the points, key measures included here? First, there are 14 priority conservation landscapes which will be included in this protection. So 14 priority conservation landscapes will be 14 priority or important areas, landscapes, forest corridors, they will be protected. Then camera traps, genetic studies, eDNA for scientific monitoring. There's a very important point here, which is M stripes. What is M stripes? I think I've already told this to you earlier also. M stripes is monitoring system for tigers, right? It talks about intensive protection and ecological status. This is basically GPS based technology. GPS based technology so that we can figure out or track tiger movement. M stripes is, they have stripes, right? So we can track their movement, tiger movement using GPS, and this will ensure that we can monitor patrolling, we can monitor poaching. What is poaching? This also focuses on anti-poaching. What is poaching? Poaching would be illegal hunting and usage and trade of wild animals. So illegal hunting, capturing, killing of wild animals for their meat, skin, horns, and other valuable body parts, that is called poaching. So this also strengthens anti-poaching because we are using M stripes to make sure that we know where they are going, what are their movements, and whether they are being patrolled or not. So this also strengthens anti-poaching. This prevents their poaching because we can simply use technology to monitor them, right? And prevents wildlife crime prevention. Then, of course, this is something I told you earlier also. Whenever you're trying to protect a wildlife, community participation is very important. You cannot do that without community participation, because no matter how many technologies I use, poaching can be done by finding loopholes. So community participation becomes very important, and that's what is focused in this as well, and sustainable livelihoods, right? Then this also includes trans-boundary cooperation with neighboring countries. Why? Because they move, right? So it also includes transnational, transboundary cooperation, because clouded leopards, they cross national boundaries. Next, it also incorporates climate resilience and adaptive management into conservation efforts. It's quite obvious that if we do not include these management, adaptive management or climate resilience into conservation, we will not be able to deal with it, will not be able to protect them sufficiently, because conservation strategies should be able to deal with the climate changes also, should be able to deal with, they should be resilient with climate, right? Climate changes. Next is Arunachal Pradesh's first Ramsar site. Glaw Lake in Arunachal Pradesh has been designated as India's 101st Ramsar site, and this is the state's, Arunachal Pradesh's, first Ramsar wetland. What is a wetland or what is a Ramsar site? A Ramsar site is a wetland of international importance. It is recognized by Ramsar Convention 1971. Ramsar Convention was done in 1971. India became a member in 1981, and a wetland gets Ramsar recognition because it is especially important for its biodiversity, water resources, ecological functions. But it does not mean it becomes national something of it does not mean that it will start being protected. See, being Ramsar site simply means that the wetland gets the recognition because it is especially important for biodiversity, water resources, and ecological importance. But that does not mean it will be given special protection like national park. It does not mean that. It does not mean that it will become a protected area like national park. Okay. So let's see what it says. It is located in Kamlang Reserve, Tiger Reserve, important. Tiger Reserve and Wildlife Sanctuary. Glaw Lake is a freshwater wetland, again important. And biodiversity hotspot in the eastern Himalayas. The site supports rich biodiversity. As I told you that any wetland is given Ramsar recognition if it supports biodiversity. It is important for biodiversity, water resources, and ecological function. So this also supports biodiversity, including 150 plus tree species and 49 orchid species. Then India's Ramsar sites have increased from 26 in 2014 to 101 in 2026. I'm sure you must be thinking that you have to remember so many things now. And Ramsar sites are increasing so much, so quickly. And I agree with it. The designation aims to strengthen wetland conservation, biodiversity protection. See, if any wetland gets Ramsar recognition, that means it is especially important, internationally important. So, of course, it will receive the protection. But that does not mean it will become like national park and it will become a protected area. It's not like that. Next is PM Pranam. The government is promoting balanced fertilizer use, organic farming, and natural farming through PM Pranam. How will you remember it? See, normally when we get exasperated with somebody, frustrated with somebody, we fold our hands and say, okay, that's it, right? So that is also Pranam, right? So this is how you can remember that we have said Pranam to the not so environment friendly fertilizers. So this means that we have said Pranam to chemical fertilizers. So we will not be using chemical fertilizers. We will be using organic fertilizers now. So here, and why would we do that? To improve soil health. So PM Pranam is about using balanced fertilizer, organic fertilizer, natural farming so that soil health can be improved and our dependence on chemical fertilizers can be reduced, right? In 2025-26, there were 5 states or UTs, Dadra and Nagar Haveli, Delhi, Goa, Manipur and Mizoram. They reduced chemical fertilizer consumption by 0.18 lakh metric tons. And in fact, in PM Pranam, these incentives, so there are incentives in this PM Pranam which have not been dispersed yet, but these 5 states and UTs have already reduced their dependence on chemical fertilizers. Then under PKVY and MOVCDNER, over 21.29 lakh hectares have been brought under organic farming. So this much hectare have been brought under organic farming. But what is PKVY? PKVY is for organic farming across India, and this is especially for organic farming in northeast regions. NER is northeast region. So PKVY is Paramparagat Krishi Vikas Yojana. It promotes organic farming throughout India through cluster of farmers. And MOVCDNER is Mission Organic Value Chain Development for especially for northeastern region. So there we talk about organic farming throughout India, across India, and this is organic farming especially in northeast region. And under these two programs, 21.29 lakh hectares of lands have already been brought under organic farming, and this has benefited so many farmers. Do we need to remember all these numbers? No. The National Mission on Natural Farming created 18,893 clusters covering 10.32 lakh hectares. So the point to be remembered here is what is PM Pranam meant for? There are 5 states and UTs which have already reduced their dependence on the chemical fertilizers, and there are 2 special schemes related to this, PKVY and MOVCDNER. PKVY is for organic farming throughout or across India, and MOVCDNER is especially for northeast region. And in this program, government is also promoting precision nutrient management, which includes that you can use organic manures, compost. These can be included. These can be used in place of the chemical fertilizers. Next is 300 gigawatt non-fossil fuel power capacity. See, it says non-fossil fuel power capacity. That means we are not dependent on fossil fuel for this power capacity. So what would we using it for? What would we getting it for? We would be getting it from solar energy, wind energy, hydro energy, biopower, nuclear. So these are the numbers. Do we need to remember the numbers? Not precisely, but we need to know that 300 gigawatt of non-fossil fuel power capacity has already been crossed by India, which is a major milestone. And right now, this you can remember, non-fossil fuel sources are over 54% of India's total installed power capacity of around 552 gigawatt. Next. Next is about Chandipura virus outbreak. So, Center has deployed National Joint Outbreak Response Team to Gujarat and Rajasthan to strengthen the response to Chandipura virus outbreak. Now, why is it important for us? Because virus outbreak can very easily start being contagious, and viruses are usually something that are not controlled easily. So you have to be very, very careful. You have to be very careful in the preventive stage itself, right? So what are they checking? Center has sent, as I told you, National Joint Outbreak Response Team to Gujarat and Rajasthan to control this Chandipura virus outbreak. And what are they focusing on? They're focusing on how the disease spreads, this epidemiology. This is how the disease spreads, the clinical care, that is how to treat patients, whether animals are involved or not. Vector surveillance, vector is when any disease, so for example, this is because of virus, but that virus will be carried by a different animal and that animal will infect humans. So the carrier in between is called a vector, right? So vector surveillance, whether animals are involved in this or not. And there is also whole genome sequencing, meaning is the virus changing, is the form of virus changing, because virus keeps changing, right? If the form of if are there any changes in the virus, then as I told you, sand flies and other vectors, for especially this Chandipura virus, it is supposed that sand flies are the vectors that are there for Chandipura virus. Chandipur virus. What is that? What is sandflies and what is the vector? So basically, this virus is carried by the sandflies, and the sandflies then infect humans. So sandflies act as vector. And then they are also studying, are there other vectors, other animals also which are involved in this or not? Then they're also spreading, they're also checking the spread of the virus. So active surveillance and community testing is done. Active surveillance is done, right? And it follows One Health approach. What is One Health approach? One Health approach is a concept which means that humans, animals, and environmental health, all of them are interconnected. Humans, animals, and environmental health, they're all interconnected. That is the meaning of One Health approach. So as I told you, here we are not only looking at infected humans. Why? Because it specially focuses on humans, animals, and vectors like sandflies to check what are the other agents that can spread this disease. What are the other agents that can spread this virus? Because if you want to contain a virus, you need to know all the vectors that can be responsible for spreading the virus also, not just the infected humans. Okay, next is in infrastructure, Samudra. Now, Samudra, as the name suggests, is related to sea. Samudra is sea or maritime. Samudra is sea or maritime. It is related to sea or maritime. So India has launched Samudra, which is a unified digital platform to modernize maritime governance and services for seafarers, shipping companies, and ports. What does that mean? So India has created one online platform to manage maritime. Maritime is sea or shipping services. So this is one digital platform, digital platform to manage ship, right? Ship or sea. All the services related to ship or sea. Earlier, there were different maritime services that could involve separate processes and paperwork, but eSamudra is one platform where all those separate platforms are brought together at one platform. So there will be less paperwork, of course. It will be more efficient, of course, because they are all these services, maritime services, are together present digitally in one place. So eSamudra, when we talk about it, it is one digital platform which has maritime services right? One digital platform which has maritime services, so there will be less paperwork, there will be less paperwork and faster and more efficient, transparent governance. We know that anything that goes digital becomes more efficient and the governance becomes more transparent. So eSamudra is one digital platform which has all the maritime services. So it will have less paperwork and it will have a more efficient, faster, transparent governance. Now let's see what it says. It provides single window digital service, that is one digital platform. Online payments, tracking, digital certificates, everything is provided at one digital platform. It includes eNavik 24 into 7 grievance redressal and a planned safer tracking dashboard. What does that mean? So eNavik is 24/7 system where you can raise your complaints. Grievance redressal, that means you can raise your grievances and complaints on eNavik. Then safer tracking dashboard is, it will help track the saferers. Saferers are people who travel by sea. So it can help tracking people who travel by sea digitally. That it also includes digital saferers employment agreements and enhanced welfare measures. What does that mean? This is an employment agreement for seafarers, people who travel by sea, and it will also be made digitally, right? Next, it focuses on safety, security, mental well-being, and women's participation also in the maritime services. And India's active safer workforce rose from 1.03 lakh in 2013 to 3.23 lakh plus right now. So what it will do, it will reduce the paperwork and compliance burdens through transparent and time-bound services, as I told you, because all the services are present at one digital platform, it will reduce paperwork as well. Next is Agni 4 ballistic missile. Agni 4 is a medium-range ballistic missile which was successfully test-fired from Chandipur in Odisha. Now, what is it? See, first you need to understand what is ballistic missile. Ballistic missile is a missile that is launched in the air and it travels in projectile under the gravity and then hits the target. So let's say this is ballistic missile. So it is launched in the air, then it travels under gravity in a projectile motion and hits the target. That is ballistic. So this is ballistic missile and it is medium range. It is medium range means it can travel thousands of kilometers, but it is not large range or long range. That means it cannot cross intercontinental distances. So we have already studied earlier also, there is very short range, there is short range, there is medium range, and then there is long range. This is a medium range ballistic missile. So it can travel thousands of kilometers, and ballistic missiles mean it is a missile that is launched in the sky and then it follows a curved path to reach the target. Let's see what it says. It is intermediate range ballistic missile, as I've already told you, with a range of around 4,000 km. Developer of Agni 4 is DRDO, very important, and it is under India's indigenous Agni missile program. It is a two-stage propulsion system, and the fuel used in this is solid fuel system. Then it is a part of India's land-based strategic deterrence, as we have seen that it is launched from the ground, right? It is launched from the ground, then it follows a curved path. So it is a part of India's land-based strategic deterrence, and it bridges the gap between Agni 4 and Agni 3. So whatever the gaps we had in Agni 4 and Agni 3 is covered by Agni 2 and Agni 3 is bridged by Agni 4, right? Okay. Next is MSME Development Amendment Bill 2026. The Parliament passed MSME Development Amendment Bill 2026 to strengthen India's MSME sector, which has 9.16 crore registered enterprise employing over 40 crore people. Now let's understand this first. What is this? See, this is mainly for processing the bill. So the main process here is the bill is trying to fix any delay in payment to MSME. So if there is a delay in payment to micro, small, medium enterprises, that delay in payment can be tackled using this bill. How can it be tackled? Think about it. Let's say an MSME supplies goods to a company. So it supplies, let's say, goods worth 10 lakh rupees to a public company, right? 10 lakh rupee to a central public sector enterprise. Now, let's say that central public sector enterprise does not pay on time. So, of course, this MSME is going to face cash problem. Now, in that case, what can it do? In that case, because of the cash problem, it has already spent the money in supplying the goods and producing the goods. It is going to seek payment. So, there will be a dispute. Now, this dispute can, if it continues, MSME can approach MSME Facilitation Council, but there's a faster dispute resolution. How? Now here in this case, MSME can complain on online dispute resolution. You'll see here there is online dispute resolution. So this MSME, if it is not paid on time, can raise a complaint on online dispute resolution for quicker resolution, this quicker resolution of the dispute. And this dispute is settled within a fixed timeline. So that's how it helps. So here, instead of going to the court, even if it has to go to the court later, the 50% is immediately paid if it goes to the court later. So basically, it provides an online dispute resolution where these MSMEs can get money quickly. This dispute can be resolved quickly. Now let's see what it says. Revised MSME classification based on investment and turnover with permanent Udyam registration, faster dispute resolution. As I told you, in this bill, it is mainly meant for faster dispute resolution. It is mainly meant so that the delayed payments given to MSME can be fixed. It is mainly meant for that. So there is an online dispute resolution where it can raise the dispute and it will be given the money. Or if it goes to court, court may order payment of at least 50% of the awarded amount to MSME in certain cases. Then this public sector enterprise also, it must use TREADS for MSME invoice settlement, improving cash flow. What is TREADS? Now TREADS basically talks about, in simple terms, TREADS is Trade Receivable Discounting System. So it's an online platform that helps MSME get payment for their invoices early. So whatever invoice is raised, the payment for these invoice can be gotten at TREADS quickly. So TREADS is a platform that helps MSME get their money earlier. So what happens? MSME supplies goods, let's say, they raise an invoice, that invoice is uploaded on TREADS, and then the financer provides money to MSME and buyer pays later, right? So there is, let's say, MSME, this MSME is going to supply goods to public enterprise. Now after supplying goods, of course, invoice will be generated. That invoice will be uploaded on TREADS. After it is uploaded on TREADS, there are financiers in between. So those financiers provide money to MSME, and later the public enterprise that bought those goods, that pays to the financer. That's the entire process that it goes. States can establish multiple facilitation councils for quicker dispute resolution. So as you can see, this is all about dispute resolution as soon as possible, right? Now I'll just sum it up in one point. This whole idea is MSME will supply goods to public sector enterprise. Invoice is raised, that invoice is uploaded on TREADS. If the buyer delays a payment, then the TREADS help improve the cash flow. And later, of course, this ODR is also there, online dispute resolution. In that case also, let's say there is a resolution, there is a dispute that is created because money is not given to MSME. Then on this platform they can go and then they will get the money in time, right? If necessary, they can also approach court, and court can also order at least 50% payment in certain cases, right? Next is GI tags. What are GI tags? Now GI tag identifies products linked to specified geographical region. GI is geographical indication tag, right? GI is geographical indication tag. It tells us that a product comes from a particular place and has qualities or reputation linked to that place. That is why it is important, and that is why it has got the GI tag. For example, if I say Darjeeling tea, so it shows that it comes from Darjeeling region and it has unique quality and reputation associated with that region. That is why it has got the GI tag. So what will it do? It will prevent imitation, improve consumer trust, gives producers premium market access, better bargaining power, because you can say that this is only produced in our area. It has distinct flavor, it has distinct characteristics, distinct qualities. So anyone else will not be able to copy it. Even if they do copy, then they'll have to give the credit, right? It will improve consumers' trust. It will provide a premium market. It will provide better bargaining power to that specific product. It will ensure higher income, and it will also preserve cultural heritage. Now, what is the legal framework for GI tags? It is Geographical Indications of Goods Registration and Protection Act 1999, Rules 2002. Registration is handled by GI Registry Chennai. Now see, these are very factual stuff. There is nothing to explain in these things. So I've just included this in PDF. You can read it from the PDF. What you need to understand about GI tag is given, geographical indication tag is given to a product that comes from a particular place and has qualities or reputation linked to that place, right? Okay. Next is near universal banking coverage. India has achieved near universal banking access with 99.92% of inhabited villages now having a banking outlet within 5 kilometers. What does that mean? In simple terms, it simply means that banking is now available within easy access to every village, almost every village in India. Near universal. So it is for almost every village banking coverage. So banking facilities are available almost to every village area in India. That's what it is. So India has achieved near banking, universal banking access, as I've told you. And right now there are 99.92% of inhabited villages which have banking outlet within 5 kilometers. So earlier people used to go to far distances to just access banking facility. It was not very convenient, but right now we have achieved near universal banking access. Now, digital initiatives such as Jan Samarth, eKYC, Kisan Rin Portal are improving access to agricultural credit, and faster loan processes. Of course, in village areas, why do we need banking system? There are a lot of reasons for it. One of which is agricultural reasons, right? So people take loans. If they take loan from loan sharks, they are the farmers. If they take loan from loan sharks, they are usually stuck in debt trap, which leads to farmer suicide, which leads to a lot of problems, perpetual debt that they are in. If they have proper system of taking loans from banking, so if they have access to banking systems, we can prevent them from getting entrapped into the debt trap that they get entrapped into from taking loans from these loan sharks. So this ensures access to agricultural credit and faster loan processes. Apart from that, government and RBI are strengthening digital payment security and cyber fraud prevention, of course. Right now, these are the issues in digital banking system. So RBI and government is also functioning and working towards strengthening digital payment security, cyber fraud prevention. How? By using AI fraud detection system. AI based fraud detection, real time intelligence sharing, security guidelines, and public awareness campaigns. So basically, this news is about the fact that we have achieved near universal banking access. Right now, there is banking access available to 99.92% of inhabited villages, which have banking outlet within 5 kilometers of their area. Right? Earlier, it was not like that. Okay, before we move ahead, I have a news for you. So right now, 50%, up to 50% sale is going on all our live online courses from 11th to 16th of August. And this is available for both the IES Foundation course and the main courses. And right now the prices are lowest ever. So if you haven't joined us already and if you wish to join us, call on this number 87501 87501. Now we come to the last part of our lecture, which is a question for you. It says, with reference to geographical indications in India, consider the following statements. GI protection is available only to agricultural products. Geographical Indication of Goods Registration and Protection Act was enacted in 1999. GI registry has all India jurisdiction is located in Chennai. GI protection is recognized internationally under WTO's TRIP agreement. Now, when you get this PDF, you will read about GI also in detail. I have already given this in PDF. But for now, answer this question. These are your options. Option A, 1 and 2 only, B, 2 and 3 only, C, 2, 3 and 4 only, and D, 1, 2, 3 and 4 only. So as you have seen in today's lecture, the kind of news that we had, all the pieces of news, they were very factual based. There was not much to explain, yet I tried to explain as much as I could. And you should definitely go through all the information that is given in this PDF. That's it for today's session. And if you have any questions, you can always drop them down in the comment section below. Like I said, today's lecture was a bit factual based. All right. So that's it for today's session. Thank you so much for joining in. I'll see you again in the next class. Until then, take care.
For more informative content, like, share and subscribe. And do not forget to press the bell icon to get the notifications.